last of this semester's LPC. Thank you all for coming. Please join me in welcoming Marco Santambrogio for the talk on artifacts.
Good.
All right, thank you.
Oh, wait a minute. Most good. Anyway, thank you for inviting me. I retired a few years ago, and it's nice from time to time to lecture again. Also, Kevin told me that you are an interesting audience, and you will grill me. So I expect you to give me some criticism, either constructive or destructive. Both will do. I would like to, actually, I'm going to present a paper I've written with a friend who should be here, but is there any connection?
Oh, yeah, he's here.
Anyway, I cannot introduce him. Anyway, his name is Andrea, and he might be here. Now, I'm not sure I understand how. No, this, yeah. Okay. Abstract artifacts are no less important to us than concrete ones. We know that how concrete artifacts are produced, manufactured, but we are still in the dark as to abstract ones, if they exist. We don't have a theory, a general theory of abstract artifacts. We only discuss a few examples, like the following. We have three examples: the chess queen, the Senate of the United States, and the fictional character Sherlock Holmes, which are representative of wider classes, namely any piece of, not only a piece of chess, but of any game whatsoever. And here, the Senate of the United States, or the Italian Senate, or whatever, any other country, which are on a par with institutions, either political or social institutions, and the fictional character Sherlock Holmes, which is a representative of all fictional characters. Of course, fictional characters have been studied quite extensively, and I'm going to try to show that the three classes have something in common, and what they have in common is interesting, and give us ideas as to how the fictional character Sherlock Holmes and any other fictional character might be created. Our problem is not to argue that fictional characters or abstract artifacts exist. We take it for granted that they exist, and our problem is to account for their creation. How is it that they are created? As I said, we don't have a general theory about the creation of abstract artifacts. But we only have examples, and in particular, we leave out quite a few instances. For instance, we leave out words. Anyone who believes that abstract artifacts exist will take it that words are a good example of abstract artifacts. We leave out also numbers and other mathematical entities, not because on the ground of existence, but because not everyone agrees that they are artifacts. For some mathematicians, for instance, Dedekind, no, I don't have. I had a quotation. There's a slide missing here, but I have a couple of interesting quotations. One is from Dedekind. He says, "We are a divine race and undoubtedly possess creative power, not merely in material things, railways, telegraphs, and so on, but especially in things of the mind." Frege, on the other hand, countered, "No, even the mathematician cannot create things at will, any more than the geographer can. He too can only discover what is there and name it." So we leave out numbers and other mathematical entities, and we only account for the existence of the instances I've given. So our problem is how are those abstract artifacts created? Of course, there is no doubt that Sherlock Holmes, for instance, was created by Conan Doyle, and he created it by writing his novels. But the problem is, what was he doing as he was writing his novel? What kind of speech act or whatever? What was he doing? Our strategy is the following, almost exactly the opposite of fictionalism. I take it that fictionalism about a region of discourse is the view that claims made within that discourse are best seen not as aiming at literal truth, but as a sort of fiction. As to fiction proper, fictionalists claim that authors usually only pretend to make assertions. This strategy allows fictionalists to account for our talk, for instance, mathematical talk involving abstract entities, numbers and mathematical entities, without any commitment to their existence. So they take fiction to be on a par with those other regions of discourse, and they claim that fiction sets the standard, so to speak, and those other regions of discourse mimic fiction and are sort of a kind of fiction themselves. Our strategy is almost exactly the opposite. We take fiction to be on a par with those other regions of discourse, but instead of having fiction setting the standard, we take those other areas of discourse to aim at truth, and we think that we can account for the existence of fictional entities by claiming that what authors are doing is more or less they are involved in the same kind of speech acts that those other people are engaged in. So, for instance, in the area of discourse of when it comes to defining rules of games, for instance, and setting up social institutions, those set the standard, and people like Conan Doyle and other authors do more or less the same thing. So we think that we are impressed by the similarity between the following three utterances. respectively made by Conan Doyle, by the imaginary inventor of the game of chess. The game of chess was invented centuries ago, and it was not invented by any single person. It evolved from out from some Indian game, but let us suppose that there was a person who invented it out of thin air, so to speak, in one go. And after all, there are many games being invented every day, and you can play with them on your iPhone. And then the people of the United States, who are the authors, authors of the Constitution of the United States, and these utterances are the following: Sherlock Holmes is a detective. The queen moves like a rook and the bishop combined. And 3, this is Article 1 of the Constitution of the United States. All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. Why is it here? As to fiction proper, here is our proposal in outline. First of all, we assume that fictional realism holds true. Fictional realism consists in claiming that fictional characters exist. We are assuming that fictional realism is true. We don't give any argument for it. Arguments have been given, of course, but we simply assume fictional realism to be true. Second, we argue that in writing his novels, Conan Doyle performed speech acts of stipulation. 3, we claim that stipulation is governed by a principle given by Frege in his Begriffsschrift and elsewhere, to the effect that a sentence first used to make a stipulation can later be used to assert, and any such assertion is true. And this is the crucial, this is what is crucial about stipulation. The stipulation principle, this principle, accounts for the creation of fictional characters and related entities, surprisingly, because it is well known that Frege was adamant that mathematical entities and any objective entity is not created, it can only be grasped by our mind, no creation takes place. But as we will see, the stipulation principle goes a long way towards explaining how something might be created, some abstract entity can be created. And finally, we claim that the stipulation principle entails that the report, Sherlock Holmes is a detective, is a truthful record on Conan Doyle stories, without any need to prefix it with such locutions as in the stories, fictionally, and so on. So this is our strategy in a nutshell. I don't understand why. Okay. So let us suppose that Conan Doyle wrote 1. Sherlock Holmes is a detective. He didn't, in fact, he didn't write it, but let us suppose he did. What was he doing as he wrote it down? There's a popular answer saying that he was pretending to assert. Of course, he was not asserting, since it makes no sense to ask whether one is true or false. But the popular answer, the pretense view, as we call it, has it that he was pretending to assert. this theory was put forward by John Searle in sometime in 1975, I believe. And he wrote that an author, as he is uttering or writing sentences with their little meanings, Searle said that pretending to assert amounts to the following: uttering or writing sentences with their literal meanings without undertaking commitments that are normally required by those meanings. For instance, without committing himself to the truth of those sentences, without the proper name referring to anything, and so on. So that is what pretending to assert amounts to. The pretense view, that is the view that authors only pretend to make assertions, to assert something, is not in the business of accounting for the existence of fictional characters, simply because it is precisely because fictionalists can take it as the proper account of fiction. And fictionalists appeal to this view, to the pretense view, precisely in order to not to commit themselves to the existence of abstract entities. And at any rate, the pretense view could not give any account, could not account for the creation, for the creation of fictional characters. Simply because merely pretending to do something, in particular, merely pretending to assert, is not in the business of creating it. No, as far as we know, no instance can be found of a creation originating from pretense. For instance, children pretending to playing with dolls or mud pies or things like that don't create anything, even though they are pretending. A lazy student pretending to be sick doesn't create anything. And as far as we know, there are no other examples of creation due to pretense. As I said, we are impressed by the similarity between 1, 2, and 3. 2 and 3 certainly do not involve any kind of pretense. It would be ludicrous to claim that the Constitution of the United States or any other constitution pretends to assert anything. And certainly the inventor, supposing that there was an inventor of the game of chess, surely he was not pretending anything. But this is not the main thing about 2 and 3. 2 is the queen moves like a rook and bishop combined, and 3 is the first article in the Constitution of the United States, were originally uttered to impart a meaning, a denotation of reference, what have you, to some expression, without being concerned that the imparted meaning aligns with prior uses, if any, of those expressions. And this is exactly what a stipulation amounts to. This is more or less the definition of stipulation given, for instance, by Anil Gupta in his entry in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy the entry definition in there. Imparting a meaning to some expression without being concerned that the imparted meaning aligns with prior uses of the expression in question. One, namely Sherlock Holmes is a detective, is sufficiently similar to 2 and 3, it seems to us, to conclude that also 1 was used by Conan Doyle as a stipulation. The name Sherlock Holmes had no reference. I mean, it didn't even exist. And Conan Doyle was imparting a meaning or a reference. By the way, the pretense view has another drawback. That is, it is hardly consistent with the view that proper names are directly referential. This is we are not concerned with the pretense view. As I said, the pretense view is not in the business of accounting for the existence of fictional characters. That view is independent of fictional realism, even though some authors, for instance, John Searlean himself, he was a fictional realist, and he was, of course, he held a pretense view, but the two things are altogether independent from one another. Okay. As I said, so the Conan Doyle was in the business of creating the name Sherlock Holmes and giving it a reference. Whoever invented the game of chess was stipulating that what the queen of chess is and what the piece is doing, and stipulating a property of the piece, the queen. And similarly, whoever the people, namely the authors of the Constitution, what they were doing was that they were defining or stipulating the Congress, the Senate of the. Oh, by the way, we take it that the Senate of the United States, the Queen of Chess, and Sherlock Holmes exist as abstract entities before they are realized or implemented. For instance, the Queen of Chess might be, and the game itself can be implemented in a wooden chess set. The Senate of the United States can consist in so many senators and be located somewhere in Washington and so on. But before the election were held, the abstract institution already existed. Otherwise, how could you have an election to elect senators, right? Similarly, any fictional character exists as a fictional entity before any actor can impersonate it. So we are not interested in the relationship between those abstract entities and the concrete entities that might implement or instantiate or whatever the abstract entities. So we claim that 1, 2, and 3 are sufficiently similar for us to claim that Conan Doyle, as he wrote down 1, Sherlock Holmes is a detective, was stipulating something. Now, we take that the fundamental principle governing stipulation is the following. This comes from a letter to Hilbert by Frege, and you have to bear in mind that Frege held a rather austere view that every definition is a stipulation. So where he writes definition, you can take it to be a stipulation. Of course, he's writing about mathematics. He says every definition contains a sign, an expression, a word, which had no meaning before, and which is first given a meaning by the definition. Once this has been done, the definition can be turned into a self-evident proposition which can be used like an axiom. Therefore, it can be asserted. But we must not lose sight of the fact that a definition does not assert anything, but lays down something. So this is what Frege wrote, but his view is fairly clearly set out already in his Begriffsschrift, long before that, in 1879 or something. We take that the stipulation principle can be summarized as follows. If a stipulation is effected by uttering a sentence P, then P can subsequently be uttered assertively, and the assertion thereby made is true. Please note its conditional form. If a stipulation is effected, then, and so on. This principle is very interesting, we take in itself. Let us see why. Before Conan Doyle used 1, that is, Sherlock Holmes is a detective, as a stipulation, I hope you will agree that Sherlock Holmes did not exist. Afterwards, by the stipulation principle, that is, after Conan Doyle stipulated 1, 1 can be asserted and is true. Therefore, the corresponding truth-making state of affairs must exist together with its components. Among its components, there must be something corresponding to the name Sherlock Holmes. Therefore, Sherlock Holmes must exist. In other words, the fictional character has been created. Note 2 important points. First of all, we appeal to an assumption, and the assumption is that the structure of the truth-making state of affairs mirrors that of sentence 1. And in particular, it contains an entity referred to by the name Sherlock Holmes. This is not an innocuous assumption, but it can be defended on the ground of simplicity. It's the simplest assumption one can make. Namely, that the truth-making state of affairs mirrors the sentence 1. The second point, important point, is that this argument is not meant to convince the fictionalist who rejects the existence of fictional characters and other abstract artifacts. Why? Well, because they, of course, they are free to hold that in the stipulation principle, you see, at the end, the assertion thereby made is true. They would take this true as true in the fiction, not true simplicity, but simply because they are fictionalists and they believe that in their own area of discourse, discourse is mimicking what authors do in inventing fictions. They claim that the claims, the assertions are only true in fiction. So this argument is not meant to convince fictionalists, and they will not be convinced. This is not to say, okay, so Conan Doyle wrote down sentence one, Sherlock Holmes is a detective, and he could have written anything, but anything can be, apparently anything can be stipulated. But this is only, I mean, we have to be careful here. It is not true that everything can be stipulated. Take the following story. You know that. Once upon a time in a remote village, Tom the barber shaved all and only those villagers who did not shave themselves. The stipulation principle has it that if a stipulation is affected, then by uttering a sentence P, then P can be subsequently uttered assertively, and the assertion thereby may be true. But for could never be true. It's a contradiction. It could never be true. So we are bound to conclude that no stipulation was effective. Of course, we are free to tell a story, a very short story, like Once Upon a Time, Tom the Barber, and so on. We are free to tell the story, but storytelling is not a stipulation, is an attempted stipulation. But it doesn't always succeed. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. So there is a story there, but no stipulation. And therefore, no fictional character. Tom the Barber cannot be a fictional character. Some authors, some philosophers, like Nathan Salmon, for instance, claim that it is very difficult to find genuinely empty names. If there are empty names, they are rare and bizarre. But here is a genuine empty, possibly even a necessarily empty name, actually necessarily empty name. Tom the Barber cannot be a referring name for the reason I stated. By the same token, one cannot stipulate that an existing object, me, for instance, have a property which is incompatible with property I already have. For instance, I cannot stipulate that I'm dark-haired because I'm white-haired. And this has fairly important consequences, as we'll see in a moment. There are several objections to this theory. The first objection is the following. The stipulation principle ensures that one, Sherlock Holmes is a detective as such, without any prefix like in the story, fictionally, and so on, is true. Once Conan Doyle stipulated it, it becomes possible to assert it, and the assertion thereby made is true. True simplicity, not true in the story. But now we have we are facing a problem. How could it be true? You see, Sherlock Holmes if Sherlock Holmes is a detective, he must be a human being. But no human being is a fictional character. And if we assume that Sherlock Holmes is a fictional character, so we have a contradiction. But we can't have contradictions, right? So what should we say? This is a well-known problem, and Wagen many years ago tried to account for it. And his solution is the following. He considers what Descartes could have said in reply to an objection which goes as follows. We human beings are mainly our souls. We are immaterial and substances because we are mainly our soul. Now, souls are, as immaterial substances, cannot have any property that are exemplified by material objects. For instance, we cannot weight, souls don't have a weight, souls don't move around in space, and so on. So Wagen claims Descartes had to say something like the following. Okay, we do not have the properties that are typical of material entities, material substances, but they are in a certain relation with those properties. Namely, they have a body which has those properties of material entities, right? So it is one thing to exemplify a property, and another thing to be in a certain relation, a different relation with those properties. Similarly, Wagen claims there's a difference between Einstein, I understand that he was a real-life detective, and Sherlock Holmes, who's a fictional detective. Einstein exemplifies the property of being a detective, right? Sherlock Holmes, who is a fictional character and a fictional detective, doesn't exemplify the same property. He has a different relation with respect to a different relation, namely the relation of being ascribed the property of being a detective. Two distinct relations to the same property. So this is Wagen's solution to the problem above. Now, how good is the solution? We claim that it is flawed. And the reason it is flawed is the following, that it is hard to understand how Wagen could account for the truth of 5. 5 is Richard Feynman resembles Sherlock Holmes insofar as they are both clever. This is perfectly, it makes perfectly good sense, and it seems to be true. But how could it be true if Feynman, who is a real person, flesh and blood person, and Sherlock Holmes, who is a fictional character, have, according to Wagen, two different relations to the same entity, to the same property of being clever. We would never say there's a 5-star. The number 8 resembles number 28 insofar as they are both related to number 7. 8 being its successor, 28 being divisible by 7. We would never say such a thing. Everything resembles everything else, okay. But 5-star, it certainly cannot be true. So Van Inwagen's solution doesn't seem to be working. Okay, here's our answer. By the way, if you want to interrupt, if you feel like interrupting me for any, both for asking for clarificatory, both for clarification or proper objection, please do. Go ahead. Our solution is the following. We appeal to meaning transfer. Meaning transfer, as was introduced by Geoffrey Nunberg many years ago, is an ubiquitous linguistic phenomenon, and it comes up with respect in utterances like 6 and 7. We can say things like, I'm parked next to the restaurant, meaning my car is parked next to the restaurant. Or a waiter can say to another waiter, the ham sandwich asked for the bill or left without paying. We understand perfectly well what's happening, but ham sandwiches are not in the business of leaving without paying or asking for the bill. And people, unlike vehicles, are not parked. But we understand very well what's happening. There's nothing strange. It's perfectly normal. And Nunberg himself explained the phenomenon as follows. This is a rather convoluted explanation given by Nunberg. It says more or less, I'll give you a simpler version in a minute. The idea here is that there are two properties. P is a property of vehicle, say, and P prime is a property of people. Intuitively, people owning a vehicle or something. And then there is a transfer, a mapping, a function from one property to the other. And there are two predicates. It's a fairly convoluted explanation. There are two predicates which are spelled the same, namely being parked or asking for the bill. A substitution takes place inadvertently, but the mapping is salient, and there is no need for explaining what's happening. And so one property is substituted to another. Actually, forget about this convoluted explanation. There's a simpler way of understanding it. There's a predicate and there is a property, and the predicate and the property are the same. Suppose being parked out there. What happens is simply that meaning transfer denotes the same property, but the extension of the property is enlarged. Instead of encompassing only vehicles, say, it only includes the owners of the vehicles, the respective owners. So if my car is parked out there, after the meaning transfer, I'm parked out there as I'm the owner of my car. The car is there, the extension of the property is enlarged, I'm in the extension of that of the same property. There's no substitution of a property for another. Is that clear? Okay, our claim is that every stipulation affects a meaning transfer. What happens with Sherlock Holmes is the following. Conan Doyle writes, stipulates. Sherlock Holmes is a detective. The property of being a detective is the property of being a detective. There is no need to move to another property, mapping no map to another property. The extension of the property of being a detective is simply enlarged so that now beyond the real life detectives are in the extension of the property, but also fictional detectives are after the stipulation, and therefore after the meaning transfer, fictional detectives are also in the extension of the property of being a detective. So we claim that every stipulation affects a meaning transfer. This is fairly trivial. We also have a converse, a conjecture, that is that every meaning transfer is due to some stipulation or other. And now we have to show how Van Inwagen's pitfall is avoided. You see, the problem with Van Inwagen's solution, to remind you, Van Inwagen claimed that there are two distinct relations that two distinct relations. I mean, the idea was Richard Feynman resembles Sherlock Holmes insofar as they're both clever. There are two distinct relations, one for Feynman and the other for Sherlock Holmes. They are related in two different ways to the property of being clever, okay? But that doesn't work because, remember, 5 star, number 8 resembles, we would never say number 8 resembles number 28 insofar as they are both related to number 7 in two different ways. Okay, we would never say such a thing. But it is perfectly all right to say both the red Tesla and I are parked next to the restaurant. Or both you and the ham sandwich paid 10 euros. It's perfectly fine. They're both perfectly fine. Now, what happens here is that there's one property being parked next to the restaurant, but the Tesla is a vehicle. I'm not a vehicle. But in one case, with respect to the Tesla, the property of being parked next to the restaurant is not, it doesn't undergo a meaning transfer. But in my case, it does undergo a meaning transfer. This difference, however, doesn't make it, doesn't make it 5 double star improper. It is perfectly true. It can be uttered perfectly truthfully. Similarly, 5 3 star. Both you and the ham sandwich paid 10 euros. The difference is that the property of paying 10 euros is taken in a transverse sense in one case, but not in the other. But they are both perfectly fine. So we avoid the pitfall the pitfall incurred by Manivage. Another interesting point is that no hidden prefix is needed in 8. The white queen goes on the D1 square, for instance. You see, fictionalists claim, and in general, whoever claims that endorses the pretense view, claims that claims that 1 uttered as a report, one is Sherlock Holmes is a detective, uttered as a report is only fictionally true, not literally. Sherlock Holmes is a detective in the story, in the Sherlock Holmes story. But due to the stipulation principle, no such prefix is needed. Similarly, 8, the white queen goes on the D1 square, doesn't have any prefix in it. It would be preposterous to say in the game of chess or things like that. Similarly, no prefix is needed in the case of Sherlock Holmes is a detective. It is true, however, that sometimes we do need a prefix. For instance, a prefix in the game of chess is useful to disambiguate a tsar, because the queen has a powerful role to play. Can be either, we can mean either the the Queen of England, for instance, or the Queen of Chess. In order to disambiguate, it is useful to have a prefix in the game of chess. Several authors have claimed that in case there is no, it's not easy to see how such a, even in case, okay, forget about it. Okay, so no hidden prefix is needed there. In connection with prefixes, there's another objection to our theory. And the objection is the following. Conan Doyle wrote in a study in Scarlet that Dr. Watson was wounded in his shoulder in the Battle of Mainwand. However, in the sign of 4, or the 4, Conan Doyle wrote, in the same battle, he was wounded in his leg. Is there a contradiction? If we take the two novels as being part of an all-encompassing novel, there seems to be a contradiction there, because Dr. Watson was wounded only once, and in one place it is said that he was wounded in his leg, in the other he was wounded in his shoulder. Is it a contradiction there? If there is a contradiction, then recall the stipulation principle, we would have to conclude that no stipulation has taken place. Storytelling, maybe, but no stipulation, and therefore no reason to suppose that Sherlock Holmes exists as a fictional character. Because the idea is that fictional characters exist in virtue, so to speak, of the stipulation principle, if a proper stipulation is affected. So if there were a contradiction, we would have to conclude that there's a story there, perhaps, but no stipulation. And therefore, no reason to claim that Sherlock Holmes exists. There are several solutions to this problem. David Lewis gave one, and there are many others. Our solution is very simple. It is the idea that fictional characters are continuous and, pretty much like ordinary people. We are continuous. We live in time. There are stages, time slices, and the same goes for characters, fictional characters. The difference between fictional characters and real people is simply that authors have the right to change their past. Take Dr. Watson. In a subsequent, at some stage, I can't remember where, I don't know actually, when A Study in Scarlet was written. Suppose it was written sometime in the 90s, 1890s or something. Then Conan Doyle changed his mind, or maybe he forgot about what he wrote in A Study in Scarlet, and in The Sign of the Four, a few years later, he changed the past. He changed the past of Dr. Watson. But that's okay. He could do that. He could do that, and there's no contradiction there. So the prefix in A Study in Scarlet and the prefix in The Sign of Four are needed in order to mark the relevant stage in the life of the fictional character. Now, there's I now have to consider an object, Frege's reasons to object to the idea that fictional entities, and I mean, he was referring to mathematical entities. As I said, we are not interested in mathematical mathematical entities, but his objection to creation in mathematics apply, as far as I understand, to any objective entity, and therefore not just to mathematical entities, but also any kind of abstract artifact. He says, the objectivity of this is from the Grundlage. The objectivity of the North Sea is not affected by the fact that it is a matter of our arbitrary choice which part of all the water on the Earth's surface we mark off and elect to call the North Sea. This is no reason for deciding to investigate the North Sea by psychological methods. In the same way, number two is something objective. And he goes on and says, I distinguish what I call objective from what is handleable or spatial or actual. The axis of the Earth is objective, and so is the center of mass of the solar system, but I should not call them actual in the way the Earth itself is. We often speak of the equator as an imaginary line, but it would be wrong to call it an imaginary line in the dyslogistic sense. It is not a creature of thought, the product of a psychological process, but is only recognized or apprehended by thought. If to be recognized were to be created, then we should be able to say nothing positive about the creator for any period earlier than the date of its alleged creation. This is what Frege says about being objective. What is objective is what is subject to laws, what can be conceived and judged, what is expressible in words. Now, it seems that Sherlock Holmes certainly is objective. It is subject to laws, can be conceived and judged. It's certainly expressible in words. So we must conclude that Sherlock Holmes is as objective as anything. And now here is Frege's argument against the idea of creating anything objective. Remember my first quotation from Frege, in which Frege was saying that the mathematician is in the same business as the geographer. I mean, they only describe things. They are not in the business of creating anything. They're exploring the geographical word or the mathematical word, not creating it. His argument is if, and only if, I added it here, but it's in so. I mean, in the original there's only if, but I think it's fair to add the only if part. If to be recognized were to be created, then we should be able to say nothing positive about the equator or the North Sea or any period earlier than the date of its alleged creation. But of course, we are able to say things about the North Sea as it was, say, 1 million years ago, the equator as well. One can ask whether the equator was in the same place as it is now 1 billion years ago. It was the equator 1 billion years ago. Now, are we able to say anything about Sherlock Holmes? Before it was created? The idea, Frege's idea is, if something was created, we should be unable to say anything positive about it before the date of its creation. The equator was not created, and in fact, we are able to say things about it, how it was before its creation, its alleged creation. Okay? Similarly for the North Sea. Are we able to say anything about Sherlock Holmes before its the time of its creation? No. We don't seem to be able to say anything about Sherlock Holmes. Of course, we could say that, I mean, Conan Doyle says things like he was suppose he was created I don't know, around 1890 or something, or maybe later, I don't know. Sherlock Holmes could say he was a budding consulting detective already in his teens, say somewhere around 1870, something. But of course, it is in fictional time, not in real time, right? I mean, there's a distinction between fictional time and real time. So we are not able to say anything positive about Sherlock Holmes before the time of its creation. So Frege's objection to Sherlock Holmes being created, I think, is not convincing. Okay, this is more or less everything I had to say about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So before we take questions, I just wanted to ask y'all if you were, so the plan is to go to the pub for a bit after the talk, and then to go out to a restaurant for pizza. It will be, I don't remember the name of the restaurant, it's something 31. It's like right over here. So if you would like to come with us all to dinner, you should all just come to the pub anyway, but if you would like to come with us to dinner, would you please raise your hands so I can get down, would like to come? That's right. Yeah, okay, great, thank you so much. Oh, and now, yes, I might say that. And now, so if you have questions, I would just ask that you raise your hand and I will write you down and I will try to get to you as we read it. So, so yeah, would you start us off? Yeah.
Can I say something before you start? I'm deaf. I'm also very old. So please speak slowly because I'm not sure. I'm unlikely to understand you. Yes.
Right. Yeah, my question is, I don't know if I missed something, but if I stipulate a fictional character, if I stipulate a fictional character, then through that act of stipulation, that character comes into existence. If I stipulate a fictional character and through that act of stipulation, it comes into existence, and then I would say, okay, the fictional character lives in the White House all alone. Then I assert that, and then I make it into assertion. So I assert this character lives all alone in the White House. That sentence should be true because it adheres to my stipulations. However, it's also not true because there are other people living in the White House, like the president. So then how do you account for these two, these double true standards without adding something like a fictionalistic quantifier or prefix?
Okay, as I said, I wouldn't be able to stipulate that I'm dark haired because I'm white haired, right? Therefore, I cannot stipulate. Now, there's a fiction about I can't remember how it is called, about Napoleon. The example, I take the example from Scripture. In the story, Napoleon was lazy, he was handsome and fair-headed. Actually, he was ugly, short and ugly, and dark-haired. And if a reader doesn't understand that the Napoleon in the fiction is somehow meant to be the real Napoleon. He was lazy, he wasn't doing anything, and the story is interesting just because there's such a contrast between the real Napoleon and the fictional one. If one doesn't understand that, one doesn't understand the point of the story, right? Kripke is perfectly right about that. What we have to say, precisely because of what you said, is that the fictional Napoleon is not the real Napoleon. It's a distinct entity, an abstract entity, fictional character. The fictional character is distinct. It's not to be, it's not identical to the real Napoleon. Of course, one has to realize that there's a connection between the real Napoleon and the fictional Napoleon. And there's a mapping, and what happens in general, fiction is a take again Sherlock Conan Doyle. Conan Doyle creates Sherlock Holmes. He creates, together with Sherlock Holmes, creates a whole bunch of entities. For instance, London, fictional London. Why must fictional London be distinct from real London? Simply because in fictional London there lived Sherlock Holmes, who, and in real London there never was Sherlock, right? So if we took real London to be the same as fictional London, there would be a contradiction. It would be incompetent because there should be, because Sherlock Holmes would be living and not living in the same city, right? But we had to conclude that fictional London is distinct from fictional London is distinct from real London. And so what happens is that in creating, in writing a story, Conan Doyle introduced a whole bunch of entities. There's a mapping going from a partial mapping going from the real world to the fictional world. A partial mapping because not everything that is in the real world is also in the fictional world, and into the fictional world because not everything that is in the fictional world comes from the real world. Sherlock Holmes, for instance, is in the fictional world, but there is no real Sherlock Holmes. Is that an answer to your question?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
About fictional characters with a different past from one book to another, for example, what happens with the Dr. Watson that got shot in the shoulder? It just ceases to exist, or what exactly happens in that case?
Are you asking? There's no question of the Watson being real, right?
Yeah, there is only about the one being shot in the shoulder being or still existing.
In one stage of the fictional character, he was wounded in the Battle of Mayborn in his shoulder. At a different stage in the life of a fictional character, he was wounded in the same battle in his leg. Much like me, I was dark-haired as I was in one stage in my life, and I'm white-haired in the subsequent stage in my life. There's no contradiction. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, it wasn't a question about is there a contradiction or not, but then I think that the life of a character, as in his life is years to live, are then different from the stage that you are talking about. Because I wouldn't say that, well, the battle in which he got wounded is the. I mean, you wouldn't say that it's the same moment in his life.
Wait, we have to distinguish between his fictional life from what happens in the real world. As a fictional character, he was created in the real world in certain years by Conan Doyle, and later on, Conan Doyle changed his mind or whatever. He changed Dr. Watson's path, and whereas in an earlier stage, he made him wounded in his leg. Later on, he made it wounded in his shoulder in the same battle maybe. Is that satisfactory?
Yeah, so we would just say that the previous stage of Dr. Watson just doesn't exist anymore. That's
No, it exists. I mean, it exists. My early, okay, in a way, I'm no longer young and dark haired, but my early stage is still there somehow. I cannot change my past, right? But okay. Okay. You can say whatever you like as to if you take continuance to be subsequently, slices, the whole wall stays there, doesn't disappear, it still exists, right? Similarly for fictional character, the whole wall is still there, and the properties of slices Yeah.
Oh, yeah, what was about this meaning transfer principle, whether it always gives the right result? So, your car park example, suppose there's sort of two car parks, and you'll have your car, with one car park, and I'm talking to you next to your car, and you ask, and so where are you? Meaning, where is your car? And I say, I'm in the other car park, I'm not here. And that seems like, perfectly fine if the other things are fine, but your meaning essentially principle was
not here.
sorry?
You say, I'm in the other car park.
I'm not here, but on your principle that would come out as describing contradictory properties. Because I still have a proper opinion. Obviously, I told you I'm obviously in that
You are in the other car, if and only your car in the other car.
Yeah, but
The extension of the property, the car park, the she park in that car park, gets extended insofar as the owners of the drivers of the cars that are there are also put in the extension. Okay?
I'm not talking about card, because I changed it to I am in the other car park versus I am here, because I have a location myself and my car has a location.
Wait a minute, it's not I, it's a meaning transfer. Geoffrey Nunberg makes a difference between reference and meaning transfer. The pronoun I is not transferred. You are you. You also have the property of being part of there, if and only if your car is part of it. You're not part of it because your car is not part of it.
Yeah, my example doesn't involve card. That's critical to the example. I changed the example not using the word card, otherwise it doesn't work. I just talked about, sorry?
We have two colors.
Well, okay, so maybe that would be a different example. I'm just talking about location, and I say I'm in the other car park, I'm not here. But you can see I'm talking to you, you can see I'm here, and then
And not in the other car.
because it's
Wait,
it's not in the car park where I am. I'm in one car park, and my car is in the other. And what I'm saying is, if the meaning of I am like a location, that predicates, gets extended, then you can't account for, I could, on your theory, I could say, I'm in the other car park, and I'm also here, and that would come out true on your theory. But what I might more naturally say, if I'm actually engaging in that sort of transfer meaning, I mean the other car park, I'm not here.
Not sure I get it wrong. Say, where are you? Here. Now, where is your car?
Okay. There's car park 1 and car park 2.
Okay.
I'm talking to you in car park 1. My car is in car park 2. That's the idea. Never mind.
Actually, covered. I'm not sure. Do you have the letter?
Yes.
The idea, okay, here's the idea. It's natural to say that when the meaning gets transferred, new things come into the extension of the predicate and other things get taken out. That sort of, when I use this in this transferred sense, then people's I am at or my location is gets transferred as if from people to their car's location, but no longer applies to the people's actual
No,
location.
why-
But on your theory to predict would only ever get extended, and that creates the problem. So, but it's more, the example is supposed to show to account for the data, you also sometimes need to take out something of the extension, you can't just add.
Okay, I will have to think. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, so I was wondering about what seems like an asymmetry in your strategy between proper names and other expressions. So when it comes to proper names, you start multiplying fictional these entities, these abstract objects, because you say that if the story says things about Napoleon that are incompatible with the real Napoleon, then we have to have a fictional Napoleon, and similarly with London and maybe the White House and so on. But I don't understand why you take that strategy with proper names, but you don't take it with other expressions. So, for example, if you take the term detective, then the Sherlock Holmes stories have say things about detectives that are incompatible with facts about the term the property of being a detective. Like because it was that property never applied to someone like Sherlock Holmes, and so you might think that just applying the same strategy that you apply to proper names, you would then have a fictional property being created of being a detective, which is different from the actual property of being a detective, and because that would just be mirroring what you do with proper names, and with the same motivation, but when it's not a proper name, you seem to be going for a different strategy from that, and so I'm not sure that the proper names as such should be treated so differently from, or why they should be treated so differently from other expressions, because these are all expressions which do have a reference, and then the problem is being generated simply by incompatibility with the actual facts about the reference.
Could you give me an example of connection with being a detective?
Yeah, because the actual facts about the property of being a detective has included that property is not possessed by anyone remotely like Sherlock Holmes. And so the stories involve something about the property of being a detective that is incompatible with the actual facts about being a detective. And so I mean that seems like the same kind of motivation that you had for postulating a fictional London, which was that the actual facts about the reference of the term London were incompatible with what you get in the stories.
So you would say that we have a different property of being a detective, and we would still be able to understand what goes on in the story.
Well, I mean, obviously, I think there's a worry about if this principle is applied very extensively, how on earth we understand any fiction, because the reference to practically every term being changed. But that is only an extrapolation from a strategy that you are using in the case of some terms in stories.
I don't know how to think about it, but it seems to me that if you see, if we change the property of being a detective or any other property, it would be very hard to understand it when they do.
But it would. But I mean, it's all if you're told that in respect of the Sherlock Holmes stories, look, don't imagine that the term London in these stories is referring to London. It's not referring to London, and the term England is not referring to England, and the the term Charing Cross is not referring. I mean, if you take that line with all the proper names in those stories, it will already become a pretty confusing set of stories. And the term Afghanistan is not referring to Afghanistan, because and the term Maiwand, as in the battle, doesn't refer to Maiwand. I mean, we're just kind of at the level of proper names, that we're already losing touch with the story. If the strategy is applied to all these names, and the motivation for applying it seems to be the same. I mean, presumably there was no Dr. Watson who got really good anywhere what my one. Thank you.
Somewhere I have to think about it. It's is there any, if you take the property of being a detective, would there be any incompatibility between I suppose I had to posit a fictional Napoleon or London or Afghanistan, because otherwise we would have an incompatibility, contradiction.
But that's because you're holding fixed the facts about the actual London, that the actual London didn't contain anyone like Sherlock Holmes. But it's also true of the actual property being the detective, that it wasn't possessed by anyone like Sherlock Holmes. So it's not obvious what the difference of principle is.
The property, the extension of the property gets enlarged, right?
Yeah, but you could say all kinds of things about what happened to the to London, or or the use of the term London, that could change in some weird way, but the original motivation for the shift seems to be roughly the same in the two cases. That we've got the term where with its original reference, it refers to something, the facts about which are incompatible with what's said in the story, and then in some cases, the shift that you're making is to you're saying the reference is the same, that something, because the property is the same, but the extension is changing or whatever. Mm-hmm. Whereas in other cases, you're saying that we need to introduce a new artifact, like a new fictional character, London. And so those are two very different strategies, and it's not obvious why you're kind of sort of mixing the two strategies rather than applying it to one. So there's a distinction between the property staying the same and its extension changing. Whenever a child is born, the extension changes, but the property of the new child stays the same. So it is one thing to change a property and a different thing to change its extension. Now, the stipulation, Sherlock Holmes is a detective, makes it true that the extension of being a detective is enlarged and includes a fictional entity, but the property stays the same. I don't know what conception you have of property, because I mean the property. I don't have any Well, I mean,
We should probably
yes,
move on to
okay.
other questions.
So, yeah, I don't think there's any coherent conception of property which will way the way.
Yeah, so thanks. I was thinking about so at some point you focused on this distinction between presenting and stipulating. And maybe it's just a matter of the example, but I was wondering whether the example of the children and dolls is significantly different from the things that you take as examples of creating abstract objects. So, in other words, why don't you think that also in the case of the children and the dolls, something abstract is created? Or something similar is happening there?
What is created apart from the fiction?
Well, the characters, right?
Well,
so the baby characters, right? Just like a piece of some material can implement, in a sense, the queen role. So also the doll might implement the role of an abstract baby. So why taking the two examples to be significantly different?
Mhm. I understand.
So it's not meant as an objectional
No,
view. I was just curious to know why you take
I
this.
see, I would say, well, okay, you might have a stipulation there too, but no. Okay, maybe there are. It's not clear to me, okay, in the examples, you might be right. In the examples, it might be true, but we do have some creation of fictional characters or whatever. I'm not sure that was a fictional character. The children playing dolls. There's a child. There's a doll. The doll is a baby. There isn't any creation of a baby. Right. Okay, but I understand. I see.
So I'm sorry for those who had questions in the queue, but we should